Mabuhay, and today we're going to be looking at a car that I think is a little bit misunderstood. Because before, Subaru used to sell a lot of the XV. That was because before, the cars in its class weren't really up to, how do I say this, to this level. It was the only car that offered all-wheel drive, it had the EyeSight system, and all of the things that make a Subaru. But times have changed. A lot of the competition has caught up already. And now with this new one, which is now called the Crosstrek, by the way, it's not the XV anymore, it kinda is in a weird place. Is there still enough about the Crosstrek to make it a sellable car? Well, we'll find out. In terms of looks, it still pretty much resembles the previous XV. They just did a little minor tweaks here and there, but overall, when you look at it, you can still tell that, oh, it's a Subaru and it's the XV, which is now called the Crosstrek, by the way. It's not the XV anymore. Not anymore XV, Crosstrek. So let's look at the changes. Starting with the front, they tweaked it a little bit more. Headlights that are sharper a little bit. It kind of resembles now the WRX and all the other cars in the Subaru lineup. Over at the side, you get 17-inch blacked out alloy wheels because this is the base model. You also get cladding, and up here in front, these are actually working vents here. I'm not really sure what for, probably aerodynamic, but I'm really not sure. But what I can really say is that they did a pretty decent job. The XV, not XV Crosstrek, has always been a very good looking car. It's always been kind of future looking, so little tweaks here and there have brought it a little further into the new generation of crossovers now in the market. But I will add also that this is where the cladding makes sense. It doesn't look good to the WRX sedan, I'm sorry. Here, it really does. And this nice orange color also complements just how lively and sporty the overall proportions of the car are. But yes, again, overall, the Crosstrek looks like a very good and very capable crossover. Since this is pretty much the same generation as the previous one, just a little minor changes here and there. Inside, it's relatively the same as well in terms of the layout and all of that. Although there are some things that are pretty glaring. Like for example, this hard plastic here in the middle. That used to be a soft touch material in the previous generation. Well, not previous generation, previous model. Sorry. So I'm kind of sad to see that Subaru went with this sort of harder plastic that kind of degrades the quality a little bit. Not too much, because it still has the texture of leather, but if you really, touch it and all of that, you can see that it's hard plastic. But nonetheless, it's okay. In front of me, I'm very happy to report that it still has analog gauges and very nice fonted analog gauges. It's one of my most favorite gauges in the market now. In the middle, you have a small digital screen that shows you settings for your EyeSight. You have your fuel economy and all of that. You can change that there. Here in this small screen in the middle. The steering wheel, I'm happy to report, is not some polyurethane material. It's actual leather, and it feels chunky and very nice to hold. It's very rugged, very fitting to the car that we're in right now. You have paddle shifters here. Then on the left side, you have your control for the stereo system. And on the right side, you have your control for the car settings such as the Subaru EyeSight system, and then you have your sport mode and intelligent mode here. So that's the steering wheel. This is the Subaru Starlink system, the infotainment screen, where, as you can see, most of the settings are. It lags a little bit, but it's not too bad. It has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so that's good. Down here, you have, surprisingly, an aux cord jack. Then you have a USB-C to USB-C port and a normal USB to USB port. And then your gear shifter, your electronic handbrake, and then you have your 12-volt socket here. So the interior, because this is the 2.0i-L, the base model, doesn't have much leather apart from the steering wheel. The seats aren't leather. The other panels, although some are soft touch, aren't, I think, leather. There's some fabric material, but it's not so bad. Honestly, if this is something that you want to use every day, it's still comfortable. It still feels sort of premium. I wouldn't say super premium, but it's sort of there. My only main complaint about this infotainment system, by the way, is that every time I start the car, I have to reset the settings for auto start stop. As you can see, it's over here. But that's because I think the screen was customized. You can customize the widgets here. So in other cars, if you haven't customized this yet, you have to press this little car icon, and then you have to look at the settings for the car, then you have to press auto start stop, you have to turn that off, and then you have to turn on vehicle hold if that's something you want. You can also turn on the X mode here, and then if you press this, it's the other settings for the EyeSight system. So that's there. But that's just my main complaint about the interior. A little bit of a downgrade in terms of the interior panels, and the screen is sometimes a little bit hard to get used to and it lags a little bit. But I do have to commend that even though this is the base model, the sound system is pretty decent. But other than that, everything else is fine. There's nothing here that I think would confuse anybody, which is what I think Subaru was going for anyway. It's still a very familiar layout, and ergonomic wise, I have no complaints. If the front area of the interior, there are a lot of creature comforts, that's fine. The same cannot be said about the second row. Unfortunately, and you'll find out later just how expensive this car is, you don't get anything. You get space. I mean, I have decent space. This is my driving position here. Legroom's fine, headroom's fine, but in terms of creature comforts, you don't get anything. You don't even get a center armrest. Nope. Aircon vents? No. Charging ports? No. You just get seats. So we normally don't talk about cargo space, but I have to commend the Crosstrek for having a decent amount. Yesterday I went to the driving range and I was able to fit my golf bag like this. It's not the biggest golf bag in the world, but at least I was able to fit a full-size golf bag with all my clubs here this way, closing it without any hassle. You also get a tonneau cover. So at least in terms of cargo space, the Crosstrek has enough. So as you noticed, I kind of breezed through the other parts of this review because Subaru didn't really do much in changing a lot of the features and things inside the Crosstrek. Although they did update a lot of things like the infotainment screen and all of that, everything else is basically the same as the before. The most important thing though, why people actually did buy the previous model and why Subaru is still selling this one, is because of how it drives. Although I wasn't really sold on the previous model's driving characteristics, I found it to be lethargic, I found it to be thirsty with fuel, and generally speaking, it was rugged. That's all it was. You could take it anywhere and that was it. But you're not always going to drive off-road, right? You're not always going to be taking it to a trail or biking up a mountain or climbing a staircase or whatever it is people who are active do. So I'm happy to report that even on normal city driving conditions, it feels a lot different. So this steering rack, for example, apparently comes from the all-new Subaru WRX, which is a very welcome thing, and I can feel it. The steering is much more precise, it's much lighter, and it feels like it's giving me more feedback than the previous model ever did. This one is actually pretty fun to zip around traffic in because it has good proportions. It's not too wide, it's not too long. It's easy to go in and go out of traffic, do it safely. But that's just the steering. In terms of the engine, although it's the same engine, it's still a 2-liter naturally aspirated boxer engine producing 156 horsepower and 190 something Newton meters of torque. I'm not really sure. I forgot the exact figure. But although it's the same, it feels so much more lively. I can tell that off acceleration of standstill is very good, and keeping up in traffic in terms of the highway, because I was able to drive this last week before this review on Media Drive with Subaru, so we were on NLEX and it was perfectly fine. I didn't feel that it was slow or lethargic like the previous model was. It feels zippier now and much more engaging. And overall, for me, that's the best thing about this Crosstrek, is that now it doesn't feel like it can be rugged off-road. It also is just as engaging to drive, even on-road. So that's the best thing about this car that I think Subaru did really well in updating, in terms of coming from not really a next generation model to just a facelifted model, so to speak. So it's good to know that they're going back to their roots. making it fun to drive on and off-road. And also the other point that I brought out in terms of fuel economy, I'm happy to report that this car is much more fuel efficient than the previous generation. It is actually very frugal. I can tell that I've been driving this car for about 2 days already, and we're here in Alabang. I came from the city. Alabang is a city, but you get what I'm saying. I went to Alabang, and then all of the driving and the idling and all of that, I just used 1 bar of fuel. So right now it's telling me that this car is much more efficient than the previous model. All of those things aside though, all the great driving dynamics and all of the things that are good about it, the most important thing about a Subaru nowadays is safety. And that's how we have to talk about the EyeSight system. So now the EyeSight system has been updated. It now has 3 cameras as opposed to the previous 1 and the previous 2. This is an updated system. There are 3 cameras now, giving the car more eyes, so to speak, so that it can read the road better. And I was able to test this out on the Skyway earlier, and the adaptive cruise control, very responsive, very smooth. The lane keep assist is assertive but not dominating. So I like that it was able to keep me between the lines but not really force me left or right like other ADAS systems do. So in terms of EyeSight, it's there, it's updated, and it's one of the best things about buying a Subaru nowadays. Although all these things, considering all these things, and that this is the base model with all the bells and whistles that you would get from a base model, there is one big problem with the Crosstrek. This car, in all of its base model glory, retails for 1,998,000 Philippine pesos, which is just too much money for this. Like I said earlier in the intro, most of its competitors have caught up in terms of creature comforts, capability, build quality, and all of that. Although Subaru claims this car is made in Japan, if that means anything to you. But for me personally, it's just too much. I really like this car. I do. I like that when I'm driving it, I feel like I'm the most safe person I can be on the road. I know that I can take it anywhere, go on any road, or maybe even cross a small river and come out perfectly fine, because this is a Subaru all-wheel drive after all. But 1,998,000 pesos is just too much money for me. Although, if you're the type of person who wants a dependable, reliable, and very capable crossover, and this car has really tested its formula. This is the how manyth generation already of the XV Crosstrek platform, and I think this is the best one in terms of being able to give you good driving dynamics, creature comforts, and all of that. It's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a little too much money. Although there are people, and I've seen already a few of this on the road, who maybe still this car appeals to. Maybe you're that type of person. And if you are, then honestly, if you can afford it, can't go wrong with that. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel below, and also don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. This has been Pablo Salapantan of YugaAuto. Thank you for watching. Paalam.